Craftsman Days are here at Lowe's with big savings on the tools you need. Save $100 on the Craftsman V20 6-Tool Power Tool Combo Kit, now at $199. No matter what the project is, Craftsman's high-quality, high-performance products empower you to build on. Stop by your nearest Lowe's store and check out the full line of Craftsman tools today. Valid through 6/18 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Hey, quick heads up before we get rolling. If you're building something big and need a boost, PaperNapkinWisdom.com has a stack of free tools ready for you. Strategy, mindset, leadership, all there, totally free. You can even hit the link in bio on social media, and let's level up.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govind Jayaraman.
Hi, I'm Govind Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode 255. Today's episode might just shift how you see everything. Let me ask you a question. What if the way you experience your world, the wins, the setbacks, the stuckness, and momentum wasn't determined by your circumstances, but by something else entirely? What if leadership wasn't just about what you do, but about how you are? In today's conversation, we welcome Seema Dhanoa, a transformational coach, conscious leadership facilitator, and author. Her work is helping leaders around the world rethink performance, presence, and personal power. Seema brought with her a napkin filled with insight, a visual framework that might at first glance seem simple, but once you hear her unpack it, you'll realize it holds the key to a deeper level of alignment, balance, and clarity, not just in your business, but in your body, mind, and life. We're not going to spoil it here, but I want you to stay with us because in the next few minutes, you're going to hear something that will shift your inner state. And that shift may just change your outer results. Let's dive in. Seema, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Govind. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So you shared, I commented in the green room before we began that your handwriting is fantastic. So you packed a lot onto this napkin, and that's not normal without it looking sort of jumbled. So you did a really great job of it. And I think we're going to go through it in a little bit of an order. I'm not going to describe the whole napkin to people listening. Certainly, if you're listening, find it online, take a look at it because there's a lot there. But we're going to start off with the top right of your napkin where you talked about alignment and balance. Why did you start there?
Yes. So I feel like the napkin that emerged for me, it reflects kind of my journey that I had, and one of key moments of personal transformation. And there was a period in my life while I was on the West Coast working for a financial institution, and I had two vice president roles at that time. I was vice president of business integration and of payments, and that payments area was undergoing like a major technology transformation. At that same time, I was doing my executive MBA. And so I found myself like asking the question of like, how do I find balance in my life? Because of course, everything was quite consumed by work and work life. And that's just all it was. And I made like a really big mistake. I looked at balance as time, right? And I think we hear that as leaders of, how you spend your day and how you can allocate your time. So I ended up doing that. And I didn't have enough hours in the day. And I did the very bad habit of cutting back on my sleep. And so for years, I did that of like sleeping minimal hours just to fit everything in. And along that way, I ended up ignoring migraines, headaches, just sometimes not feeling very well. And then one day, it's like I collapsed at work. And it's like I finally said to myself, you know what? I think something is wrong. And the funny part is that for 3 years I had all these symptoms, and I completely ignored, what my body was telling me. And so that's when I really had to take a pause. Like I had to take a time out from my career. I had to step back and just focus on my health and figure out, what was actually going on for me. And I found that, I was completely depleted. And so it was just kind of like a significant moment where I knew that in my path, in my journey, I had to kind of really think about, what does balance mean to me? What were my beliefs? And what I discovered was that I had this belief that balance was a factor of time. And we hear about all these hacks, life hacks, you know, health hack, and everything is like a hack. And I found myself kind of trapped in this like vicious cycle because I was trying to race against time. And you know what? Well, when we try to do that, we lose. We can never win against that. And so I had to take like a real journey of understanding the meaning of balance. Like what does it mean for me? What does it mean for my life? And that's where kind of the insight came out that I feel balanced when my mind, my heart, my body, and intuition is in harmony, and there's alignment. And it doesn't matter what I'm doing, whether it's work or fun social time or whatever it is. It's the fact of what I feel in that moment, that it feels like there's harmony there between these parts of myself. Because I realized of what I did before, segregated myself, and I was kind of broken, like very strong kind of in the mind, but then it's like physically I wasn't doing well. But well, that affects your emotional state too. But I didn't realize it because I was in that constant kind of work grind.
Mm. So I don't want to rush to just where you left off because there was a lot there, and I think a lot of us think about time management as being the source of balance, and you discovered that it was more to do with energy, and there's so much there. But I also want to pick up on this other thing that you talked about, that there were warning signs, right? There were warning signs that you had fallen out of balance,
Yes.
and I like to talk about this. Sometimes it taps you with a toothpick, and then the toothpick gets a little bit better. It's a stick, and then the stick
Yes.
becomes a 2x4, and then the 2x4 isn't tapping you; it's smacking you in the side of the head,
Yes.
right? And that's kind of
That's
what
right.
happened, right? I mean, you collapsed at work.
Yes.
For a lot of people, they even ignore that. So why was that your wake up? Like, what happened that made you sit up and say, "Oh, something's wrong"?
Well, like I remember that day I was meeting with some directors on my team and I just started feeling ill. So I got up and I walked away. I excused myself and I went to the restroom. And it's like as soon as I went into the restroom, there was no one that was there. And after I collapsed and I came to, I'm lying on the bathroom floor just thinking like something is wrong with me. And I can't ignore this anymore because like it's like, what if you collapse while you're driving?
Mm,
Or, if you're, walking along trying to, in Vancouver, there's the SkyTrain or something getting on transit, walking on the street. I just realized like how that could have been so bad. The
yeah.
result of that could have been, injury or something worse. And I felt like my body stopped me and said, no, that you've been ignoring the body for so long. So now the body was just like, it's done.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, it wasn't worse than it was. I mean, I've
Yes.
heard of stories of people collapsing in a bathroom, and you hit your head,
You
and
hit your head.
that can be
Yeah.
terrible. So thankfully, it wasn't worse. And thankfully, you're smiling and thinking that there's a funny part in it, right? You said the funny part is, it's
Yeah,
good to find the humor in it.
yeah. In it's just like there's many like signs along the way. Like, it's just like with the headaches and the migraines. And the funny part was like I had this assessment. So I even went and got this health assessment that was part of, when you have these executive benefits.
Mm.
And so I met with a team there, and then I even spoke with a psychologist there and said to me, you're going to be stepping into doing your executive MBA. You're already such a busy person. You're having headaches. How are you going to get through this? And I ignored it then. in speaking to a professional, I ignored it. And what I started to do was these like coping habits. I've always been a very healthy person, like eating really well. But it's like in the afternoon, I would, try to eat foods that were like pick-me-ups. But, sometimes it was like berries, like that rush of sugar with some like nuts, grab another green tea. And it's like I'd come home and then I would work out at night. You feel the endorphins. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I feel great. I feel
Mhm.
wonderful. And I was masking it with these other habits, which are good things to do. But the thing was, it was this cycle that I was on, and I was in denial about that. I'm not able to handle this. There's too much on my plate. And I was
Whether you're into a quick gloss and go or full glam with bold colors, we all have that one product we can't live without. For me, it's the Thrive Cosmetics Liquid Lash Extensions Mascara. It gives my lashes unbelievable length and definition, like extensions in a tube. And with 6 shades that don't clump, smudge, or flake, it stays flawless all day. Plus, removal is a dream. It slides off with warm water, no tugging required. The best part? Thrive Cosmetics is 100% vegan, cruelty-free, and made with clean, skin-loving ingredients. And when you shop, you're giving back. They've donated over $150 million in products and cash to support causes like cancer, homelessness, and domestic abuse. High-performance beauty that gives back? That's something I'll always stand behind. Try your new trusty favorites with an exclusive set for our listeners. New customers can get the Liquid Lash Extensions Mascara and a mini-sized Brilliant Eye Brightener at a special set price with free shipping at thrivecosmetics.com/beauty. That's Thrive Cosmetics, CAUSEMETICS.com/beauty.
unable to say no.
Yeah, so you're almost like trying to. Some people medicate in a negative way. You were
Yeah.
medicating with self-care, which was at
Yes.
least positive, but not. It was just masking. So one of the other things that sometimes when people have something happen to them and they get that hit, that the 2x4 hits them in the side of the head, like it happened for you when you collapsed at work. Did you immediately like have this moment where all these signs came back to you and you remembered? It's like, this must be it. This is it. This is what's wrong. Did you have that eureka?
I did. I did. It was like a wave because it's like I was probably lying there for like a few seconds. Then I just kind of got up and sat up. And it is just like this kind of flashback happened of like all these like years, these years of like working and living that way. And it's just like, and I'm like, I've had so many headaches, I've had so many migraines, and I'm like, this is not normal. And it was just like a moment of like real honesty with myself. And you know what?
Mm.
I think for myself, like that's what made it such a powerful moment because for all those years I wasn't listening to my intuition. I wasn't listening to the signals from my body. And it's like, kind of the wave of memories came and I'm like, it's all there right in front of me. I have to accept where I am and I put myself here.
So taking responsibilities can sometimes feel overwhelming in of itself. So you're already overwhelmed, and now you're realizing, oh my gosh, I've got all this stuff that
Yeah.
I've got to change. So how did you take that overwhelm and turn it into an action? Because you did something with it, which was
Yes.
different. That you just sort of like persisted previous to that, but this time you did something. How did
Yes.
you turn this into action? Well, and I think that's the second part of your napkin, right?
That's right. So the thing that I did was like I knew that there was something there that made me believe that I had to work and be this way. So I had to uncover what those deep beliefs were. Like why was I a workaholic? Why was I kind of running my life in this way?
Mm.
And I knew that it was going to take that reflective time. Like sometimes I find that we don't ask ourselves deep questions and we have to challenge ourselves. We have to challenge our thinking to uncover where some of these things come from that influence our behavior and actions. And so when I asked myself the question and I got out a notebook and I got out a pen because I wanted to write down the first thing that came to me. So I asked myself, why did you do that to yourself? And then it just came out very naturally that I had this deep belief that I have to work hard and that I can create results and success if I work very, very hard. And the other part of that was kind of the external environment. And I think I did fairly well in my career from a very young age. So I was always the youngest leader in the room. And yeah, sometimes I would face that bias, right? Where there's ageism and people think that, oh, because you're young or you look young, that you're not that experienced. Then there was also the times where, in the financial industry, I was also working in technology with a lot of men and sometimes not with very, very many other women. And so you just kind of feel like you got to prove yourself. So there's the two pieces there, the two deep-seated beliefs. I have to work hard and I have to prove myself. And that's where the insight emerged for me, that it was how I was perceiving. Like, these beliefs come from my inner state. And that inner state of myself was reflecting into the outer world. So all the experience outside of myself, that's what I was focusing on. So, you know what? It is I think it's great, work ethic to want to, work hard and be passionate and all of that. But then I was taking that too hard. It was too intense. And combining that with kind of some of the bias and these things and whatever in the environment. And that's what I was focusing on. I let that become my reality. I chose to focus there. And I
Yeah.
did that.
So
Yeah.
isn't it neat that we see the world as we are, not as it is, right? And you saw I have to work hard. I have to prove myself. I have to work hard. I have to prove myself. And you made the world around you sort of fit that perception that you had, didn't you?
That's exactly it.
Right.
That's exactly it. And it was such a powerful moment to realize that, to realize the world that we see is a result of our deep beliefs and how we choose to perceive it. Yeah, there's some parts that happen in the unconscious parts of our mind, and that's just how the brain works, but it's where we decide to focus and put our attention. Now, we can observe bias and these sorts of things in the environment, but we have to learn to be, I think, in a place of where we're observing it and not where you latch on to, say, a certain idea and that ends up manifesting and becoming something. So it was just kind of a really big moment where I'm like, this is so critical for the rest of my life, knowing the relationship that I have with my inner self, right? The inner state and the outer world. However I feel on the inside and whatever I believe, that is the world that will become. And that whatever the world that becomes, and we act upon it.
So I think it was really profound. So the first step was, your desire to find balance. Unfortunately, it came as the result of an event, right? So I have this visual. You're lying there, sort of sitting up in the
Yes.
bathroom floor, going, "Oh my gosh, I've got to do something," and you're realizing that you've got to make this change. You become conscious of this connection between your mind, body, heart, intuition, and then you ask this deep question. Did you judge this? Did you judge work as a bad thing to ask the question, or were you just curious? Like, where did this come from? And how did you give yourself the permission to ask yourself that question so openly?
I
Sometimes
think
we
that,
do this negatively, right?
yeah,
We say, like, "Oh,
yeah,
why am I such a workaholic?" And it
yeah.
leads us down possibly not an open path, not a curious path.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, I did have that awareness of like how I want to ask that question. Cause the other thing was like, I've been really proud of my career, right? Like, I know that I've created amazing results that's helped communities, that's helped people. So ultimately that's been the desire behind my career. And so that's why I had to ask the question, like why I turned out to be like this workaholic. And what I also unpacked and found there is that, what it is that I truly want to do, and that is to be in service of humanity, to make this world better. And it was this
Mhm.
sort of feeling of all this work that needs to be done in the world and all this potential out there that we can be better, that's what I'm striving for. So it's almost as if it's like I understood kind of, I had to pull out that intention. I had to pull out
Mhm.
that intention, but it's like my mindset and those deep beliefs and my actions didn't match. So
Got
that
it.
created that sort of friction where I became misaligned in my path. But yeah,
So I think there's a lot there. And I think you became aware of this. And when you became aware of this dissonance, this difference, this lack of
yeah.
alignment, how did you find alignment? How did you build alignment? What did that look like? Because that can be really uncomfortable for a lot of
It
people.
is.
And for a lot of people, it can also be really disassociating. And here's what I mean by that. You
Mhm.
had success.
Yes.
You had, for all intents and purposes, you had two VP roles at a very
Yeah.
young age
Yeah.
in the financial world, which is, again, a
Yes.
tough place for anyone to get in, let alone a young woman. So,
Yes.
as a young woman, you've made two VP roles at financial institutions. Check, check, check. Lots of good things
Yes.
going on. But wait a minute, I'm out of alignment. Those two ideas may not sync up. How did you resolve that? And there's another point that you made, and I think it's part of the same answer. You didn't say subconscious, you said unconscious. And
Hmm.
that says to me that you did some work on understanding that your unconscious mind isn't subservient to your conscious mind. It just works with
Yeah.
it in a different way. So I think there's something that you know, you left me a little bit of a hint,
Yes.
but fill in the blanks, please.
Yes. So, what I had to do first was like I told myself like I need to step back, but that stepping back was looking at my life from like an eagle's perspective, being able to soar above and look at my life and the direction that I was going in. And that's where the crossroad came up. The question came up of, what is my purpose? Is my intent that I just want to get into the C-suite? And the thing is, when you're in the corporate world, you get kind of programmed to just keep climbing the ladder.
Mhm.
So so that's what I had to recognize. Like, was my desire, my intent that I want to be in the C-suite, or is it that I'm trying to create impact and change? Because that's something that I love to do. And I realized that I wasn't meant to be in the C-suite. What I was meant to do was to discover the next part of my life that was calling me, that was saying, you need to help leaders. You need to help leaders find this new way of leading. You need to, what everything that I understood about consciousness and going through my own personal transformation was calling me to another part of my future, and which was to create this book on conscious leadership. And so that's where now uncovering all of that, when we, sometimes it's scary about what's the purpose of my life and what am I meant to do. And I think it's all these lessons and learnings that we have along the way that create these kind of breadcrumbs. But what I observed with myself was that there was this unconscious element, whatever environments we're in, whenever we are kind of running on autopilot, that we drop out of awareness. And that was kind of what I really learned during that time, is that because I was on this big cycle, like this treadmill that never stopped, go, 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 go. And your mind is constantly running. Lots of leaders, lots of people live their life like this. They're so busy, so busy. Got to pick up the kids, got to do this, got to make dinner. Oh, I got to take the dog for a walk. You're constantly running around. And what I saw was, as soon as I was forced to become quiet, as soon as I was forced to find stillness, as soon as I was forced to find inner peace and balance again, that is when I realized that there was times where I lacked awareness, and I was letting kind of these unconscious habits, this habitual thinking and all these things that my brain has learned to do just run on autopilot. And it was this intentionalness that was missing, of what am I doing? Why am I doing it? How am I living? How am I spending my day? That was lacking.
Mhm. So, so what you did was sort of turn away from these habits that you'd built
Yes.
in climbing the corporate ladder
Yes.
and replace them with a new set, right?
Yes.
A new set of habits. Now, what changed for you when you sort of moved into this place that was more aligned? Like,
Yeah.
did you start working hard again?
So, I feel like what I did was, by finding kind of this like balance with myself and finding kind of the calling of like my book, I felt whole. And the reason why I felt whole was that I was listening to my intuition. And I find that, in life, when we ignore our inner voice, not sometimes that narrator voice in the mind, but that deep inner voice, when we ignore it, we start chipping parts of ourself away. So I felt like all of these parts of myself had come back and I felt whole. And it was about establishing new habits. I've always been big into healthy eating, big into wellness, and all of that. And what I committed to myself was not to put myself in that place again, that I have to establish these boundaries. I have to establish new habits. And part of the trap that would have fall into was the nighttime trap. It's like, oh, why don't I do some work now and get ahead tomorrow?
Mhm.
And I decided to replace those habits with things that I enjoy, like reading The Economist, sitting down and watching a good show, going for a walk or going for a run or whatever it is. But replacing that habit with something that allows me to feel presence, allows me to just do something that I want to do versus what I'm forcing myself to do.
And, understanding the difference between those two things can be pretty tricky at first.
Yes.
Um, because I think sometimes we feel, oh, well, I'm forcing myself is for some people, making healthy choices is forcing themselves, right? For some people, it's forcing themselves to go for a walk or go for a hike.
Mm-hmm.
And for other people, work comes easier because they're good at it. It makes them feel
Yes.
good, right?
Yeah.
But one way to think about it is like you said, you talk about this mindsets and so a long time ago, someone gave me a napkin and it was the myth of time management, and he talked
Yes.
about how it's really about energy management. And in his model, there were essentially four different buckets, right? There's a spiritual, physical, mental, and emotional bucket. And you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about that
Very
in your own
similarly.
way
Yeah.
between mind, body, heart, and intuition, right? So
Yeah.
going back to those things is what helped you. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Right. So how do you regulate that today? How does that work for you today?
So I think that, I look at my life and what happened, and I think some of those things that those events that happened were really profound moments of learning, right? So when we have those profound moments of learning, I believe like it happens for a reason. And so I think that the journey that I've been on is really about living like a conscious life, being aware of, just as that other individual put it, like the spiritual, like which is similar to like what I'm saying, is that is what's important to me, and my life has to be that way of being, that way of living, and it's not about scheduling things in. And so I feel like this is where like a major shift comes in that came from myself, but I feel like this happens for people when you're not scheduling in, meditation as an activity, or, I'm going to do a run at this time. I think it is a profound shift in understanding that our being and our way of living is what is most important. And when we feel that sort of harmony with our emotions, that we are whole, our mind, our body feels great, we're taking care of our spiritual self, anything that we do will be in alignment. Your work will be in alignment. Your family time will be in alignment because you yourself are in that state of balance. So I feel like in my life and what I do, like I'm really aware of my day. Like I start my day with meditation. I set an intention for my day. And that intention helps me to keep in mind, like, what is the way of being that I want for the day? So I'm not setting like, for example, even if I look at the week, like, I'm not setting goals. I got to get this done, that done, and that. It's my intention is about, what I'm looking to fill for the week. And sometimes, like I've said to myself, my intention for the week is just to be in the state of flow. That's it. That was my intention. State of flow, because I knew that I was in a busy period with my book, and that's all I wanted to be was in flow. And so I found that to be a really helpful practice. And then the other practice that I established, which I also wrote about in my book, and I tell people to do, is that I check in with myself often. Like I check in with myself every single day. I ask myself, how am I doing? what's going on for you? And I find that we don't do this simple thing. And instead, what we have is sometimes stress and all these things start to build up in the background. And it's only when we snap or have some sort of moment where we realize that we are actually stressed out. And so I find it's a very simple practice, takes a couple seconds to just check in with yourself and ask, how are you doing? How am I doing? How do I feel?
So somewhere there's someone listening and they're running a small or growing business. They may be a solo or small entrepreneur, and they're running 12-hour days, and they feel like they have to. They don't have an option right now, and they're listening to this and saying, check in with myself. I don't have time to check in with myself. I have barely time to do anything. So they're on this time. They're on the time,
Yes.
the treadmill right now, where they're trading time for everything. What would you say to that person? What's one quick way that they can start checking in with themselves and transforming their habits?
I think it's as simple as taking a pause in the day, right? If you are working 12-hour days, like having a break, a 5-minute break, a 10-minute break, just walking away with what you're doing, go outside, get some fresh air, and just ask yourself, like, how am I doing? Sometimes if you ask yourself how I'm doing, and you say to yourself, well, I'm really stressed out. There's a lot going on. I'm in it on my own. This is really hard. Life is tough. It's so important to bring awareness to those things. Then it's like, okay, I'm bringing awareness to what's happening here. This is what's going on for me. This is not going to be permanent. This is something that I'm going to be able to like work through. So it is, when we don't self-inquire, we're hiding what's there. But when we ask ourselves how we are doing and we bring awareness to it, it starts to break that treadmill pattern. It starts to like shatter it. And that would be just a very simple thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's really, there's a lot there to just noticing it and bringing some awareness to it. And I think that we solve things that we notice. We don't solve
Yes,
things that we don't notice. And if you allow yourself to fake or hide from the truth that's going on, it will perpetuate until it gets worse. But if you notice it, you call attention to it, you acknowledge it, your unconscious also conspires to find a way to improve it too, doesn't it?
that's right. That is the most powerful thing that we can do. Whatever we notice is what ends up being. That's what ends up being in kind of our world. And so I think that sometimes people forget that our attention is so powerful. Like our attention commands all these resources in our brain. And so even when you start noticing it and you start noticing it and you're starting, it's coming up for you now often, that usually is what helps people to then be like, you know what, maybe I'm going to do something a little bit different today. Maybe I'm not going to work till 7 p.m. I'm going to stop at 5:30. It just takes those small moments that eventually lead to some form of recognition and then a change in behavior.
And there's a power of something else that you are sort of talking about, something that I like to talk about that a mentor once taught me, is the power of while. And while you're doing something, you do something else. So while you
Yes.
go for a walk, while you get some fresh air, you bring
Yes.
some awareness to this. You check in
Yes.
on yourself. You check in on your
Yes.
energy. There's a real high ROI around doing things that fill up more than one bucket at a time. Going back to those bucket things. And you're
That's
talking
right.
about the same kind of intention here, right?
That's right. That's right. And I think the greatest, if we're talking about time, like all of those moments are an investment in yourself. Like you're investing in yourself. You're making yourself heal. You're making yourself whole. And that is very profound and powerful. And you do that for little bits every day, little bits, these like micro little bits. And eventually it adds up into something substantial. And so, I'm a big believer in going outside. I'm a big believer in going out into nature. I spend a lot of time in nature, and that is where somewhere where I did all of that kind of deep thinking and uncovering, because sometimes we got to change our environment. Our physical environment makes our certain habits come out. It just comes on automatic. So it's very important to get into a different environment, like going for a walk, stepping outside, get out of your workplace, your work zone, so that you can have a moment to be spending some very, very, very powerful time with yourself.
That's great. As a shout out to a previous Paper Napkin Wisdom guest, we've been asking every guest to appreciate something. So John Rulin was on the podcast about 11 years ago, and he shared with us a very important paper napkin, which was what you appreciate appreciates. And he started a movement around that, became a best-selling book, and a second book that's come out post his passing. Giftology was the first book. In any event, John passed away suddenly last year, and we've been asking all our guests this year to shout out something, to pay some appreciation forward into the universe, because what we appreciate does appreciate. So who would you like to shout out today?
I would like to shout out my partner, Steve. So he has been so supportive of my path and by my side. He's actually kind of the first person I've met, like in terms of a partner that supports me 100% about what I'm doing with my life and what I'm doing with my work and my career. And that means a lot.
Yeah, it certainly goes a long way, doesn't it?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Seema. I appreciate you coming to share your story with us.
Thank you for having me.
What if awareness really is the key that unlocks everything? In this episode of Paper Napkin Wisdom, we explored the deep insights of Seema Dhanoa, a leader, coach, and heart-centered warrior guiding people back to themselves. Through our conversation, she invited us to look inward, not just as a form of self-reflection, but as a strategic advantage in how we lead, how we show up, and how we live. Her paper napkin, a deceptively simple sketch, challenges us to rethink what drives our results. It isn't just about what's happening outside of us. It's about the invisible connection between our mind, body, heart, and intuition, and how we align those to shift both perception and reality. Seema reminded us that alignment is a felt experience, not a checkbox. Balance isn't found, it's created through connection. Leadership begins with presence, not performance. And most importantly, our inner state shapes our outer world. So take a moment now, pause, reflect. What is your inner state right now? Are you listening to your intuition? Are your mind and heart in conversation? What reality are you shaping without even realizing it? Because when we bring awareness to that, everything begins to shift. Alignment is an inner process, not an outer one. Awareness is the foundation of conscious leadership. Your inner state defines your outer reality. Mindset, intention, and presence are power tools. Conscious leadership is a practice, not a title. If something in this episode stirred something inside you, don't let it pass unnoticed. Jot down your insight on a napkin and take a photo. Share it with the hashtag #PaperNapkinWisdom and let's start a ripple of conscious leadership. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Because leadership is not a solo journey. It's a shared awakening. Today, you've been listening to Paper Napkin Wisdom, and until next time, stay aware, stay aligned, and keep turning small ideas into big results. Make it a great day.